We know that the motivations of some of those involved in this are reactionary, and they are to return us to an era where LGBT people should get back in the closet and hide and be ashamed of the way they are. We aren't going to get back in the closet or hide or be ashamed of the way we are. And nor are we going to allow a generation of pupils that are now in school to go through what the pupils in the 80s had to go through because this chamber let them down. And nor are we going to allow this to happen in the name.
I'm standing because I don't have a chair, so.
Oh no!
I'm
You look energized though.
Yeah, I work better if I sit. I'm like really in it, but if I stand, then I get to like spread out a little bit more and not like tense up. So it's all right.
Right.
But
Understandable.
I loving this makeup. This dark. Is it like a dark?
Thank you. I wasn't sure whether to go dark or light. I said, okay, whatever.
I'm
Very lazy on the.
I've got black on too, but I've got my pastel blue and my pastel pink joggers on right now. I was trying to do the full trans spectrum right now, so.
I don't know what the weather's like over there, but it's like 10 degrees over here. So you are in the perfect ensemble.
It's definitely not as cold as it is on the East Coast right now, where today was actually pretty warm. It was like 37 degrees, but I'm in kind of the middle of nowhere, so there's no buildings or anything like blocking the wind, so that wind is brutal. But
Oh my God. So it makes it feel like basically colder than it actually is.
yeah, West is definitely like, it's weird being back in the Midwest because I've the 2 years that I lived on the East Coast, I lived in Maryland, and those 2 winters were super mild. And then I moved from Maryland to Ohio, and I was like, okay, I've been in the Midwest, no big deal. But I was there during the summer, so I didn't have to worry about anything. And then I spent a winter in Colorado, in the mountains in Colorado, and
That's life changing.
it was so different. It was so different than any other type of cold I've been around, but kind of in a good way. I definitely enjoyed my time. Like the cold, but I'm definitely here for some hoodie weather.
Right. I definitely like a medium as well. Like not too hot, not too cold. I definitely gravitate towards spring and fall a lot. But all right, guys. Everybody who joined us, there are going to be more people joining us, but thank you for being here. And bear with me because I have a little bit of a long introduction before I introduce our guest today. So you already know what's up. My BMF Army is your favorite Jedi, BMF Goddess. I truly hope that you're all doing well during these pandemic times. I hope that the start of the new year has started off good for you all. I have a real treat for you today, though. We're going to change up the subjects that I normally do. I've actually been searching for someone for a very long time to do this subject with. You know, I finally found someone who's amazing, open, and brave. I'm just going to start off with the definition to transgender for those, you know, unaware. This is the textbook definition. If you do feel otherwise, you can voice that after. Sorry, give me a second here. I just lost my position.
All right.
I always write my notes down. I'm sorry.
You're okay. You're all right.
Where did I go? Okay. A transgender person is someone whose internal sense of themselves, a man or woman, is different than the body that they are born in. Is different than the sex they are assigned with at birth. Your biological sex is made up of a combination of things, including your sexual chromosomes, the hormones in your body, and secondary sex characteristics. But gender identity is completely internal. It's not visible to others. It's internal sense of yourself as a man or woman. So the gender they are assigned with doesn't add up to how they view themselves. When you are born, someone looks at your external genitals and assigns something to you, but that might not be how you feel inside. So someone who identifies as a transgender may identify with their gender differently than their assigned gender. Was that it, more or less?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely very like textbook because
Yeah.
like especially in the society that we live in now that is like pretty white dominant, and there's a long history of colonialism and white supremacy in that, so they really not even dumb it down, like really just whitewash it to say like there's option 1 and option 2, and if you don't like option 1 then you must be trans, and there's a whole in between these options, there's a whole plethora. So yes, that is true, and also for every trans person it is something different. For me, my like realization that I didn't match up with what was being told to me was because of what femininity is supposed to look like, right? I was like, I don't do dresses, and I don't want to do makeup, and I like being feminine because I like being soft, and I like expressing my emotions, and I like being nurturing. Like those feminine things I agree with, but the way society wanted to see me, I was like, that is not for me. I am hairy, I want a deep voice, I want to shave. Like it was a mixture of external factors and internal factors and culture all kind of combined into one. So, but that's a lot to fit into a dictionary definition.
Yeah,
You know?
that's why. Yeah, definitely. That's why I wanted you to add to that, because I'm gonna divulge to you something that I have never divulged to only but people I could count on one hand. I'm not ashamed of it, but the reason I do, I feel like I understand a little bit of what it's like to feel that way is because I am bisexual, and I noticed growing up that I had very masculine traits and felt definitely very masculine about certain things internally. And I also have feminine traits, and I definitely understand what it's like to feel that inside. I identified as the identity I was given at birth, which is woman. But I know what it's like to feel inside like you have something different than other people.
Yeah, it's definitely, and what I really appreciate about this opportunity with you, Goddess, is that I think a lot of times there's a lot of like stigma that if everybody belongs to one community that they all understand what it's like. And while that's really true, because that's how you build communities, with people who understand different than the status quo, but it also kind of gets looked over that like our identities are actually intersectional. So the opportunity to like talk to somebody in my community but hasn't walked in my shoes, that this is just really cool and doesn't actually happen as much, especially not now, as I think it should. So I want to thank you for that opportunity to even be here and like talk with you, that's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, let me finish my introduction so we can get to know you more. So, there hasn't been an official census around the world on the population of transgender people, but there has been a little bit of an overall survey, which so far says it'll be over 700,000 in the world, but I'm pretty sure it's way much over that. Or this is something that also gets misconstrued. All transgender people do have they have their own sexual orientation, just like anybody else. It often gets mixed up that transgender means gay, and it doesn't. It doesn't. I actually have one of my friends. He was born male, and he's a trans woman now, and
so she would use probably
he dates women, only women. So now he He identifies as a transgender female who is a lesbian, trans femme.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't understand that. At first, I didn't understand. This was years ago, which is why I definitely encourage people to educate yourselves. There's no harm in that. 41% of the transgender people reported attempted suicide, not because they are more mentally unstable, but because transgender people are predominantly not accepted or bullied or, crimes committed against them in our communities. I'm sorry. I'm a mess. So guys, please welcome DJ. DJ, who uses he, him, and they or them as his pronouns, is a trans masculine artist from the Midwest. Since the pandemic, DJ has spent most of his time healing from a few surgeries that he had and recovering from several setbacks, as we've all gone through as well since this chaotic past few years. DJ is passionate about speaking the truth, my kind of people, and educating himself and others about real everyday life. So I just want to start off, DJ, first and foremost. If any of my questions you don't want to answer, pass. It's totally fine with me. I'm not gonna get too personal or anything, but the questions that I am gonna ask you are just questions that I know that I've heard or people want to know, But it's totally up to you how open you want to be. I want to welcome you first and thank you for making time for us today because I truly look up to your bravery. As I know, sharing one's story is not an easy one, and I received very good energy from you from the start, and I really appreciate that. I want you to know that.
Thank you.
So, I am known for my realness and honesty. My main goal with my channel and podcast is to open the eyes of others and attack those subjects that are either taboo or, people don't really like to touch. And open the minds of others mostly in difficult subject matters. And today you are the first trans story of many that I want to do, and I'm honored. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Where were you born? Where are you from?
Yeah. So from the very beginning, well, I was born in March in 93, so 90s babies. I was born in Florida. And I didn't stay down there too long. My parents, once my grandma passed, and my brother was born, my mom and dad moved to Indiana, and then they split up. And pretty much spent the rest of my young childhood, early adult life in Indiana, just in different places all over. I lived in Texas for a while, Michigan. I've lived in Ohio. Had a pretty rough childhood. I mean, I don't know how deep you want to get into it. Parents got divorced when I was really young, got remarried, and then divorced again. They're both on their fourth marriages, so it's always been kind of chaos around.
Yeah.
I'm the oldest of 6 kids, but truth be told, no one in my family talks to me, like no cousins, aunts, grandparents, siblings, no one talks to me, whatever, and most of it is because of my choosing to live my truth.
Right.
And so that for a long time was really hard, and my truth exposure kind of like came out over time. When I was younger, I remember like the first time I had to cut my hair really short, and I remember like being so excited that I finally looked like all the other boys, and then just one day I wasn't allowed to like not wear my shirt anymore. One day I had to start wearing makeup. One day I had to wait, what do you mean that I'm not just like those other boys? Like, I don't understand.
So this includes your parents as well? They don't support?
Oh, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. But truth be told, like, they never really have. So it's not, and that's a pretty, I never want to be somebody who like falls in a statistic, but I fall in so many statistics as a queer person, and just in general. But I have learned that the like shortcoming parents have is like not wanting to accept me were because those qualities weren't accepted in themselves, either by their parents or themselves in general. So especially since the pandemic hit, I've spent a lot of time alone, like really talking to those younger parts of myself, being like, look, like you might not ever hear them say your name. You might not ever hear them call you son. Like you might, and that has nothing to do with you. That has everything to do with what's going on in their lives and what happened in their lives. So yeah, I mean, absolute chaos. I was the product of a really abusive household, all kinds of abuse for several years. You mentioned the suicide statistic at the beginning, and that is definitely something that another statistic that I fall into. I've probably attempted more than a dozen times for various reasons, but a lot of them, like the cornerstone being not accepted, like
Right.
and so it's never really, it's not, and so that almost kind of like when you tell somebody not to do something and then they do it more, you're like, wait a second, that's not what I said to do. But in a lot of ways, the more rejection I received as a trans person, as a queer person in general, but specifically as a trans person, the more I wanted to live out loud, because my whiteness is a really big protection that I have. But as a trans person, I don't have any protections. Like once people find out that I'm trans, like their mind goes somewhere completely different. And so then I become really vulnerable just sharing that part of myself. But because I'm white, I get away with so much more. And so it's really important that the more people that, like, the people from my past who rejected me, the more I get to be successful in what my life looks like, the more I get to like shed the light on the fact that there's a whole community of people who came before me who have made it possible for me to live this life that I have. And so that rejection I just use as fuel to like be more visible. And then I went to college, and I got kicked out of my first college for being queer. Because it was a private Christian school. And that was back in 2012, so 10 years ago. Almost exactly 10 years ago. Next month it'll be 10 years of that I got kicked out.
Did religion have a lot to do with why your parents couldn't
accept? Oh yeah. And that again is like a whole other like thing that I could get into, because I don't ascribe to the same religion that I grew up in, and I genuinely like dislike the religion that I grew up with. But also in where I'm at in my like spiritual and like transness journey was being able to like, part of that like breaking down that rejection that I received was because they said it was in the Bible, and I was like, was it? Because I've read it front to back a few times. I didn't see what you're seeing. So taking like the knowledge that I have there and what I know to be true about myself now, and kind of like using my truth now to view what was being told to me back then, and kind of like really just like stitching up the past, like the holes in the logic that they taught me. And like there was a reason that I brought that up, but yeah, religion definitely had a huge part in why my parents to this day still don't want to have anything to do with me. And that is scary. That is scary, that there are people who are like, oh, I'm so good, like I'm in the church, and like I just don't want you to go to hell. I'm like, you don't care about me now while I'm earthside, so like you being concerned about the afterlife doesn't affect me at all, because right now you're missing out on my joy. Right now you're missing out on an opportunity to know somebody who's amazing, and your afterlife is gonna look different than mine, I promise you that. So
absolutely. I actually my mom, growing up, she was on drugs, and when she got clean, she wanted to look for a church that she could go to, and she was kind of trying to change her life around. So I remember my mom was an open lesbian. She's passed away now, but she was with her wife since I was a little girl. And I remember me, her wife, and my sisters, we were going to different churches to kind of see where we would feel comfortable at. And we went to this Catholic church, and people were right away. I mean, my mom, she was very masculine, so people knew right away, and they made us feel uncomfortable right away. And they were like eyeballing us, and I was like 12 years old. And this is when I pretty much hit me the hardest. People don't accept this type of thing. When we got up, you know, when you go to greet each other and shake hands, peace, nobody wanted to shake our hands. And that day, my mom had explained to me why. So I'm very familiar with how religion can play on people's mind frame when it comes to this type of thing, and it's really painful, and I really feel for you. But you're so strong. I'm gonna ask you more questions so we could pretty much figure out, like, when did you first realize that you were different growing up?
I mean, internally, I want to say like I had the aha moment, which everybody has different aha moments. I've had different aha moments my whole life. But the first one, I think I was probably about 6 years old, and I loved the Disney movie Tarzan.
Oh,
And
that's a good one.
so I used to pretend that I was Tarzan in the shower, like looking for my Jane. And that's when I had really short hair too. So like I was still, at that point, I was still running around with like my boy cousins and the neighbor boys, like still playing basketball in my jean shorts and my Nikes, whatever. And then I really don't know. The birth of my younger sister was around that same time, and so things changed. I was with my mom more. I now was with my brother and now my younger sister, and I had to like be responsible and do things, and that's right around the same time that like the sexual abuse started from my mom's husband. And to me, yeah. And so for a long time, I like, that was also part of the unraveling process of where I am today, was like, because there's a lot of stigma around like, if you, oh well, you were abused as a child, like that's probably why. Like, probably not. Please, but if any,
please make that clear right now, please.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, what was so interesting, and particularly in my, because I went to trial. Like I eventually, when I was in high school, I told the police, and we went to trial and everything. He didn't go to jail or anything like that, but his sentence was actually really terrible. But that's the justice system for you. At any rate, the abuse that happened to me was not the catalyst into like, oh, this happened to me, so I need to like I need to be the opposite, so this can never happen to me again. The abuse that happened to me was because that person who abused me was also abused as a child and never got the healing that he had. He was seen as a stand-up guy and did the best that he could, and very stereotypical like older white guy, like doing what he was allowed to do and whatever. And I was the first person, not even in the like the first person to say something against this person, but there were people within the family, once I said something, said he did the same thing to me. And so the abuse that happened to me had nothing to do with my sexuality, but with the fact that there was already somebody who was broken and damaged, who saw an opportunity to take advantage of someone smaller than him because he felt small. And so it wasn't until later in life that I even realized what was happening was wrong, because there was so much like bribery that was involved, so much like shaming and secret stuff. So it really did take me a long time to dissect that. His abuse to me is not what made me queer. If anything, it gave me the opportunity to learn how to respect myself more sexually, and how to like practice consent with other people, to like respect other people's bodies, to respect my own body. But abuse does not, because people grow up in heterosexual households all the time and turn out super gay. It has nothing to do. The TV that we watch is mostly heterosexual couples. We watch more abuse on TV and don't question that than anything else. Like we consume violence all the time, and we're going to say that's what makes people gay. No, what makes people gay is the fact that gayness was actually probably the original start, to be a lover of all things, all people, all expressions, art, music, light, nature, all of the gay stuff that is like that we want to celebrate. That is what truth is. So all these people here living their truths have torn down the veil of what culture has told us makes us who we are. Like even in the trans community, there's so much gatekeeping about what is and isn't trans. I don't have time for that. I don't have time for you to think that something bad had to happen to me for me to understand how beautiful I am. Yeah, a bad thing happened, and maybe it was a flashlight and shone a light on like where I maybe wouldn't have had an opportunity to heal and believe in myself and express myself. So yeah, no, there's probably so much statistical evidence that supports that as well. And if I had that on file, I would slap it down, but I don't.
I'm glad you brought that up as well, because people think that just because this the LGBTQ community, they're all in unison. It's not even like that. We don't all just automatically understand or know or could pick each other out. That's not true. It's really not. And there are even people in our community who hate on each other, which is bad as well. So that does happen. It's not like it was just one community and they all know. You can ask one person and then the next person is going to have the same story. Not at all.
I mean, you've got, I mean, you and I right now, like two people in the LGBTQ community, like again, like this is, there's so much even bisexual erasure. Like that's still, honestly, as a queer trans person who is attracted to so many people and all types of gender expression and sexualities, I still have to catch myself on the daily, almost sometimes hourly, being like, that was kind of homophobic. What part of you is feeling ashamed of letting that other person be? Like, what about them upsets you? Like, and work on that yourself, because I still have years of conditioning that I have to rip out, and that is hard to do. And that's, and again, like, I'm a white person having to deal with all this bullshit. Like, the more non-white you are, like being a bisexual Latina woman, right? Your community is even more like targeted. Are you like the discrimination and hardship that you? I will never.
Black trans as well, yeah.
Yeah, so it's again, that's why it's so cool to be like right now, like we are in the same world and have two different experiences. That's so cool. I just again, I just want to make sure that everybody understands it.
Right. I picked the perfect person. I'm so glad you're bringing all this stuff. This is stuff I literally think about all the time, and I've been looking for somebody who could actually tell the story with me that is actually in the shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so happy. How old were you when you came out to your family? How did that, you already expressed that it didn't go well.
Yeah.
But, how exactly did it go down?
Well, there was like coming out again is, I think, kind of an unfortunate side of society, right? Like I should never have to like be fearful of like opening the door to my heart, feeling like somebody's gonna stab me. You know what I mean? Like coming out is such a weird concept to me, and I'm maybe just because it was so traumatic almost every time it happened, because there was like 3 different times I came out. And
was it a kind of situation where they didn't want to accept it, so you kept coming out?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, which is kind of why, like, I think coming out is so weird, because it's almost like,
okay, you told us, but we're
disregarding it. Almost like I was so ashamed to let them know the real me that I just like was like letting little parts of me come out at a time. Like the first time I came out was came out. I had transferred schools about a year and a half after I got kicked out of my first school. Transferred to a different college, and for my 21st birthday, posted on Facebook. I just want to let everybody know that I am playing for the other team, and yes, my mother knows, like, keep your hate to yourself. And that did not go, I mean, immediately my Facebook was just attacked with people. It was just bad. But I had called my mom a few months prior. It was like September of 2013. And I had called my mom, and we've had a really rocky relationship my whole life. But I called my mom and I was like, I want to let you know, this was when I was still feminine presenting, so before I transitioned. It's like, I want to let you know that I am attracted to women. But I am dating a man right now. She was like, okay, so what does that mean? I was like, I guess that means I'm bisexual. And she had a lot of opinions about that. She was like, okay, well, as long as you're not sleeping with a woman right now. But then I told her that I was dating a black man, and she was pissed about that. So if it wasn't one thing, it was another. So,
oh gosh.
So then when I came out for so then Valentine's Day rolled around, and I, was talking to, I was like, look, to this guy, I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. Like, it's not right for you. It's not right for me. Like, I am very much just attracted to women. He was like, okay, no big deal. Like, thank you for telling me. Like, you're a cool person, and I appreciate our time together. I was like, yeah, great, awesome. And everyone in our friend group was so upset with me that they were like, how dare you do that to him? And I'm like, he was cool. What are you talking about? Like, we're fine. Like, everything is cool. We were honest with each other about what was going on. Actually, we just became Facebook friends, so like it's weird that that's coming back around. But anyways, so that didn't go over super well. But then when I turned 21, like, finally decided that I was going to, like, just embrace the fact that I was a woman who liked women, and I wanted to date women, and I wasn't going to be scared of that anymore, and I wasn't going to be ashamed of that.
You said 21?
21, yeah.
That was my same age too when I fully came out, because my whole life, I don't know, for some reason, and I had the support. I just couldn't accept it myself. That's why I say everybody's story is different. But it happened for me at 21, so, and it was because I met the woman that brought it all the way out. I'm sorry, continue.
I think there's especially in like so even though I like knew I was different when I was younger, I still didn't have like the words for it growing up, because I grew up hearing that like gay people are the devil and like lesbians are so bad, and you know, hearing all these derogatory things about trans people. Like, so of course I'm not going to tell anybody that like I'm the things that they're telling me that I should hate. Like, I'm absolutely not going to do that. And the only reason I told my mom when I did was because something else bad had happened, and I didn't want to tell her the bad thing. I'd rather tell her like a good thing. And so whatever. So later, so that my freshman year at that second school ended, and I was living with my roommate's family, and that was really difficult because they were also super religious. And but it was really great to be with one of my childhood best friends. And then we went back to school, and I got on Tinder, and I started dating these girls, and I met this one girl, and we dated for 2 years, even got engaged. We're 6 months away from the wedding, and then called it off. But what was really interesting when we first, like the first date we went on, she came over to my apartment, and I was dressed in all black. I had a black bow tie. Well, when I came out as gay, I finally started wearing like men's clothing.
Yeah.
Because I've always been kind of like scrawny and skinny, and like I didn't necessarily hate my chest, but I just didn't have any attachment to my like having breast. And I was like, I'm kind of indifferent, and I feel better in button-ups and bow ties. Like, I feel really handsome, and that feels good to me. So like,
you are.
Thank you.
You're
I was in a black button-up, a black bow tie, black skinny jeans, black socks, black booties. Like, I was feeling so good. And this girl asked me, she said, "Do you think you're trans?" And I was like,
what is that?
And
the thing with the labels.
Like,
the labels kill us.
And it wasn't even like, it wasn't that was the first time that I had heard that word in a way that wasn't bad. That was the first time that I had heard the word that wasn't associated with something gross or weird, or it was just a genuine question. And I immediately was like, my brain said, yes, that's the word, that's the thing, that's what I've been looking for. And my societal conditioning said, no, I'm just a really, but I had like long black hair, like I loved having a little bit of makeup on, so I was like, wore masculine clothing, but still wanted to be really, like I was still really, whatever.
Right.
We dated and we got engaged and like planned the wedding out, and like I said, about 6 months before the wedding, we broke up. And that Christmas, it was my senior year of college, and that Christmas I was like, I've had enough. I'm going to cut off all my hair. Like, I'm not a woman. I don't know if I'm a man, but this hair feels like a security blanket, and I don't want to be afraid anymore. So I'm just going to like rip off my Band-Aid. And for me, ripping off the Band-Aid was cutting my hair off, because I had been attached to it for so long. Because I remember when I said when I was younger and I had short hair, and then when it started to grow out, things started to change. So
Right.
like, I was never allowed to have short hair again. And so to feel that the day after Christmas, to cut all my hair off. And the audacity of all of this is that my mom, who has rocked short hair my entire life, called me when I sent her a picture of my short hair and said, so, do you think you're a boy now? If I don't smack you, you have been rocking short hair your whole life. And you have to come after me for looking like you? I don't understand what that's all about. So, again, and now I've learned that, like, that's not me. When she was younger, maybe she wasn't allowed to have short hair or whatever, you know, like, that's not me. That is a reflection of whatever she's got going on. And I release myself of that expectation that she has of me. And so and my mom was like, I absolutely do not want to be involved, like wouldn't let us, like hated us being together, like all sorts of wild stuff. Anyway, so my mom wasn't supportive. I graduated from college in May of 2017. And then July, that summer, I finally was just like, enough is enough. I'm not happy where I am. I've been like getting closer to the truth, but not letting myself just bask in whatever this is. And I am so sick of trying to contort myself into boxes to fit what other people want from me. And so I reached out to my younger sister. At this point, we were still talking. I reached out to her and I said, like, what if I was your brother and not your sister? She was like, cool, great. I am going to love you regardless. And I was like, all right. And that's how we came up with my name. I was like, what would my name be? She was like, I don't know, let me think about it. And she said a few names. She was like, or Dakota. And I was like, oh, I really like that. And I'd already had the middle name James picked out. And so it's like, oh, Dakota James, DJ, cool, awesome, I'm going to run with it. And I messaged a few friends who just also happened to be trans and was like, hey, so, and they were like, yeah, we were wondering when you were going to let us know. Like, I was like, I'm glad that you were able to run ahead to give me the courage to come to you now and say, like, okay, I've stepped out into the open, now what? Where do I go? What do I do? And yeah, it just kind of took off from there. I had just signed a lease with some girls from the college that I went to. And I sat them down before I moved in and I was like, hey, I want you to start calling me Dakota and start using he, him pronouns. And they were like, okay, great. Awesome. And there was like, and that was that. And they had known me since I got to school. So there was no, with the people that were like genuinely my friends, there was no question. They were just like, yep, got it. Dakota, he, him, cool.
Wonderful. At least you had that support somewhere. Yeah.
I'm really grateful, especially in the Midwest, because at this time I was still in Indiana. Like, so to find some, although because I was in a college town, that college towns stereotypically tend to be more socially acceptable. So, but I did have to go to when I came out and decided to start actually medically transitioning. I drove to Chicago, which was about a 4-hour drive to get my hormones because they had informed consent, and Indiana was like, you have to go through like 6 months of therapy and get letters. And like, I'm like, I'm 24 years old at this point. If I don't know how to take care of my own body and advocate for what I need, then some therapist is not going to know how to do it. Maybe they have more words for me, but I know what I'm about and I want to do it. So Chicago, Illinois had informed consent. So I was able to just talk to a doctor about, you know, concerns and stuff. And if say yes or no, sign the paperwork and get my script. Totally worth the 4-hour drive.
Nice. Awesome. Have you yourself ever been subjected to any type of homophobia outside of your family?
Yeah.
How did you deal with that situation?
I'm really grateful that they have been, the 2 times that I can think of off the top of my head have been pretty mild. I mean, there is, before my transition, you know, there was a time when I was at a frat party and in a different state. I went to go, I mentioned that I lived in Michigan for a while. Before I was adopted my senior year, I bounced around in different families and stuff, and one of the families I lived with was in Michigan. And I had gone back a few years later to go see the daughter who was a few weeks older than me, just to hang out, and we went to her friend's frat party and going away thing, whatever. And she got drunk and left, and I'm not a drinker. So there was this girl who was there, and I was like, oh my God, she is so, I'm at a party, right? Like, she's beautiful. Like, I'm like, it definitely, so this guy like noticed that I was like into her. And I mean, I don't really need to tell you the rest of what happened. You can fill in the.
He was a hater.
And he took it to the most extreme level. I ended up leaving with 2 broken ribs. Yeah, it was purple. Like I had like bruises around my neck and my arms. Like, it was really bad. It was really, really bad. I didn't go to, like, I couldn't go to work the next day. Like, it was wild. I ended up like driving my car to this parking lot. I ran out of gas, didn't have any money. My phone had just been shut off because I couldn't pay the bill. And like, I remembered that I had some like sharp stuff in my car, and like was in the middle of this parking lot, like post being torn the up. And thankfully some friends of mine like were already on their way, and they found me, like pinged my phone and found me and stopped me literally like right before I even hurt myself, and got me back home, and stayed with me for like 72 hours because I was just going through like, I didn't call into work. Like, my boss was checking on me, and I'm like, how am I supposed to show up to an office job that I'm the receptionist with like black handprints around my neck? Like, I can't do that. I can't breathe because I've got broken ribs. And I mean, I was 20 at that point. And that was definitely really like probably one of the worst times of my life. But in mild cases where it was like a direct reflection of homophobia, I went to Chicago with my the first girl that I started dating, my first, not even my first fiance, technically my second fiance, but the first girl that I really seriously started dating. She took me to Chicago before I started my senior year, for like a senior trip, and we were at a pizza place, and we got seated, and the server was talking to this other table. They were like an older heterosexual couple. He was like, I'll be over to you in a few minutes. We're like, yeah, no problem. Like, we can see we're having a good time. And he looked over right as we had held our hands like across the table, and then he just didn't come to the table. Like 15 minutes go by, and we see him like walking around. We're like, okay, like maybe he's trying to get an order or something. Like maybe he was talking to those people for so long because they're upset. Another 10 minutes goes by, and we like reach out to another server. We're like, hi, our server hasn't been to our table yet. Like, we don't have any waters or anything. Like, we're ready to order. So he comes over to the table, takes our order, grabs our menus, and leaves. Like, brings our food over, like, or doesn't even like set it on the table, just kind of like tosses it and walks away. Like, as we had to like, I had to stop it from falling onto the floor. Never came over to clear our plates, never refilled our waters, like kept going to all these other tables, like never checked in on us, didn't give us our bill. So after, I mean, we're like, okay, I think we're just gonna leave this point. We've eaten our food, whatever.
I would have loved to. Like,
We go up to
seriously.
the hostess stand, and this is in Chicago, which is like blowing my mind. We're like downtown Chicago, and this is happening. I was so flabbergasted, and maybe I guess a little naive too. 'Cause he also looked our age, so I was like, really? Like, we're probably this. You're maybe 2 years older than me, dude, and you're gonna like treat me like that? Are you upset because she's hot? I know that I was an attractive looking woman, so like, are you upset that there's two attractive women who are dating each other and not you? Is that what this is about? Because that's on you, bro. But we went up to the hostess stand and we were like, I don't know what we're supposed to do, but like, this happened. The manager didn't say anything. Like, the hostess stand people didn't say anything. We just like put money and just walked out. We went to the neighboring restaurant that night for dinner, and the manager came out and talked to us and was like, how was your food? How was everything? We're like, we're great. You know, we got terrible service next door. And he was like, oh my God, your dessert's on me. We're like, this is great. Maybe somebody of our own kind, but like, I'm a fight or flight person all the time. So even if there's a little bit of conflict, I'm ready to. So I'm grateful that it was something that was really mild and that I didn't experience any violence, because that's definitely not the case for a lot of people. So that was a long way to say, yes, I have. And also, and
You really went through it, though. Thank
yeah,
you for sharing that. I'm sorry you went through that. That's terrible. Um, I've always been a very spiritual person, but I don't, and I respect people for whatever, you know, their religion is, but I don't respect a religion that ostracizes any group of people for being who they are and who they don't accept it.
yeah.
I just can't. Now your transition as far as your surgery. Um, what's been the hardest part of that? And do you have any regrets? Do you feel better? Did what ultimately led you to that decision?
Yeah. So honestly, I feel like my transmasculine story, compared to like a lot of the transmasculine stories that even I interact with on social media, feels really different than like what's considered normal or the correct way. Like, a lot of trans people in general, but particularly transmasc people, like, don't change their identification cards or anything, their name or anything like that legally until they like have a beard and like have had surgeries or not had surgeries, whatever. But I changed my name and gender marker right away. Like, before like pretty much as soon as I started T, I changed all my stuff. Um, and even with surgeries, which not all trans people decide to go through hormone replacement therapy or decide to have surgeries. Like, trans people are trans whether they do what you think they should or not, because it's less about like what society thinks that they should look like and more about how they are going to interact with the world around them. Honestly, transness to me is kind of just like the rejection of the outside world altogether. So I really wanted top surgery, even before I knew the word trans, simply because, like I had mentioned before, I didn't really have a connection with my chest. Literally didn't have any feeling in my chest. There just wasn't any sort of sensation. Like, I could feel pressure, but not actual touch. And it was not even necessarily about wanting to like have a flat chest. It was more about like not having parts of me that I couldn't feel anymore. But being a trans person, you, in the United States in particular, there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. Like, you have to get letters and health care, like health insurance doesn't always cover it. And if you work for, I mean, everybody experiences discrimination in the workplace, particularly with health care and fair pay and time off and all this kind of stuff. So it's an obstacle truly for anyone. unless you have money, which I do not.
Right.
So when I came out in 2017, like top surgery was, it seemed so dire. Like once I have top surgery, like so many things are going to be fixed and everything's going to be okay. Um, but I just actually recently had top surgery. I had 2 surgeries last year, and while they are trans related surgeries, they were more about my physical overall health and less about me being trans. I have essentially an emergency hysterectomy last February of 2021. I mean, I'd been waiting to get a hysterectomy for like 7 years. I have a history of sexual trauma, which caused a lot of internal damage. Um, to my cervix and my ovaries and uterus. There was endometriosis. I had polyovarian cysts. Like there's just so much trauma and pain in there that it was around this time last year, I had lost a significant amount of weight. I was in the ER multiple times. I went to the ER 2 days before my surgery because one of the cysts ruptured and I had internal bleeding. So it wasn't even like that I needed to have the hysterectomy because men don't have uteruses. It was simply like, this organ is killing me and it is going to take me out if I don't take it out first.
Right.
And so, and do I regret it? Absolutely not. Like again, before I even knew I was trans, like I never wanted to have biological children. I knew from a really young age that that was not for me. Did not want to give birth. I saw my mom go through it, and it was really traumatic for her. I didn't want anything that I had in my life to be passed down genetically. So I definitely don't regret that at all. And then I was able, thankfully, to have top surgery through the help of my community and my partner. I had top surgery in October this past fall. And the surgery that I had was different than, again, what most trans masc people go through. And so that's been kind of the hardest part about navigating that, is that I don't see anybody whose chest looks like mine anymore. Like a lot of trans masc people or non-binary masculine people will have double incision, which is like the scars across the chest.
Yeah, I normally see that. Yours is different.
And mine is different, yeah. I have a long history of self-harm. So to me, having that scarring was going to be more... That's just not what I wanted for my body. And I found a surgeon who was willing to work with what I envisioned for my body to look like.
Perfect.
And so my chest isn't like typically flat, but I also worked really hard to have a lot of muscle in my chest before I had surgery. So my chest isn't like, even though I'm a skinny person, I don't have a flat chest because 1, that's not what I wanted. And 2, that's not the kind of, I don't have to look a certain way in order for me to be who I am. But
absolutely.
And as far as like, I don't know. I don't really know how I feel about bottom surgery at this point. Like, I really like the body that I have. There's nothing wrong with my body. Since I've had my hysterectomy and my top surgery, I've been able to heal an incredible amount. My mental health has been much better. I'm finally back on hormones again. I had to stop for a while because of money and insurance issues, but like now that's taken care of. And the only regret that I have is like wishing I would have had the opportunity to maybe say something sooner. But that fear will keep people from saying any sort of truth, whether it's about themselves, about someone else. Fear will keep people in the dark for so long. And I didn't want to be in the dark anymore. I was sick of it. So now I'm walking in the light.
You're a warrior. It's definitely, you're extremely strong, especially coming from a place of really no support. Like, I commend you. Wow.
Thanks.
Do you plan on getting any more procedures, or are you pretty much done with that?
I mean, for right now, I feel like I'm done simply because we're in a pandemic right now, and the only other procedures that I could have done would be pretty extensive, and that's not... I don't feel pressure to get done. I don't feel,
For that.
yeah, I don't feel like there's anything wrong with my body right now. Like, I'm not upset with how my body looks. Like, I really like the way that my body looks right now, and I enjoy the way that, like, I get to express my body with myself and with people that I interact with. So, maybe, but right, I'm gonna wait until this pandemic
Yeah.
gets some sort of regulation.
There are still 32 states that don't have laws to protect transgender people. Like, you could be fired from a job just from being transgender. Like, you went through that in college.
Mhm.
Do you feel like the state you live in now has any laws to protect trans? No?
I'm in Wisconsin. Absolutely not. No, it is honestly so scary living in the Midwest as a queer person, but particularly as a trans person. Like, Illinois is safer, but not by much. Like, I mean, I'm in like Trump County out here. Like,
Great.
yeah. So no, no, I do not feel safe and protected out here at all.
I mean, we've came a long way with a lot of stuff. There's still a lot of just like racism.
Oh my, yeah. Oh my God.
Still a lot to get through.
It's everywhere.
Can you describe why it's important for our communities and our laws to protect transgender people?
So I studied public communication in college, and one of the things that we learned about is a communication theory called standpoint theory, which is, I mean, in layman's terms, practicing empathy and like not just learning about else's position, but trying to understand what you might do with all the factors involved. Statistically and like historically speaking, Black trans women have been the most discriminated against in all time. And also the most revolutionary point of view is going to be from the person who's been the most discriminated. A Black, trans, feminine, disabled human being is going to have the most precise viewpoint of what the world needs in order to heal. And so they're being Black trans feminine people, their average lifespan is 35. That's 6 years away from me. Like, and honestly, that average is probably even lower. Like last year, I think the youngest Black trans girl to be murdered was 17. 17 years old, murdered. Just for being a trans woman. Like, it's, so the laws that are out there protect some people and not all people, and in order literally for the world to heal, you got to give the land back. You got to protect the people who have been here the longest, and Indigenous people, Indigenous Two-Spirit people, Black people, any person of color has been here longer on the earth, and their viewpoint is going to matter the most when it comes to community healing, earth healing, spirit healing, mental healing, all of that. And there's just not, the laws right now protect white people, white rich people, white men, and there's, I mean, I said we burn it all down and start anew. Get perspectives from people who have lived through shit and who've actually like seen the world in a way that it could be instead of the way that it always has been, as far as we've been around. So it's important because there's people out there who are our age, 35 years old, and you can run to be the president of the United States. Is that a coincidence? They murdered Jesus at 33. That's not a coincidence. People who believe in the truth, there's always going to be people who, out of fear, don't want the truth to get out. Because how dare somebody else get accepted before they get accepted? You know what I mean?
Yep.
So if you're not registered to vote, because it's a trashy system, but if we don't play our part in the system, then it continues to be a trashy system. You gotta play smart. And but with passion for other people. The discrimination you went through and the discrimination I went through, we don't have to like compare it for it to be bad. It's just bad. So we got to fight together to make sure that anybody who has ever faced discrimination or hatred or fear or pain because of what's been in place, never again. Never again. That's not allowed. Not in this time. Not anymore. You know what I mean?
Guys, I know you're watching out there. I want to thank those who send kind comments about the subject today. Thank you. You guys can write your questions, DJ, or answer if you have any questions. Now, some people like to say, or they think that being transgender is a mental illness. It is not.
Correct.
Actually, in May 2013, medical professionals removed gender identity disorder from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, replacing it with gender dysphoria. This also changed the criteria for diagnosis. Gender dysphoria is a term medical experts use to describe the distress a person may feel with their gender identity does not match the gender they were assigned with at birth. There are various treatment options available to manage this discontent, including mental health services, hormonal treatments, in some cases surgery. This is a debate in the medical and transgender communities about whether or not gender dysphoria should remain in the DSM. Some believe in removing it could limit patients' access to insurance coverage, which is, I mean, I get it, but I definitely don't think it should be categorized as a mental illness, because that it isn't.
Yeah. I like, my personal perspective is you don't need dysphoria to be trans. Like I had mentioned earlier, being trans to me is like a rejection of what society expects of me. So of course, if I reject what's been handed to me, they're going to say, oh, you're crazy. Or something must be wrong with you. Well, you've got to have what I tell you you have in order for you to live the life that you tell me you want to live. So I don't buy into those systems. And so like I had, for example, like, I had my hysterectomy in Colorado, and at the time I was on Colorado's Medicaid. I didn't pay a penny for that surgery. That is a $30,000 surgery, and I was able to get it on Medicaid. No letters to psychiatrists, no letters from other mental health professionals. I went to an OBGYN surgeon, and I said, I've been in pain for this many years. And she said, great, let me cut it out for you. And that's how it should be, regardless of whether, like, you can't just go into something without knowing something. But I promise you, if somebody is willing to risk their family support, their job, their relationships, their house, in order to live who they want to be, they probably know what they're talking about. If they're willing to open the door and to let you see a part of their soul and how they want you to see them to their fullest extent, I'm pretty sure we would do whatever it took in order to be happy. So dysphoria is something that I don't agree with anymore. And that's like one of the reasons why I don't necessarily want bottom surgery, because I don't have dysphoria. And because I don't have it, if I were to go to a doctor right now and I don't have a letter that says that I am so incapable of living my life happy because I don't have a penis, that's not true. That's just not true. I don't need somebody else to tell me what I need in order to be happy. I know what I need to be happy, so let me do what I need to do to be happy. Also, I'm almost 29. I think I know what I want. But, and even doctors who are on board don't always advocate for the same thing. And not even like, yeah, it has to do with insurance, sure, whatever. But if that's part of the problem, then burn that part of the government down too. Burn that part of the society down too. If you can rewrite laws, if you can write a manual on what a dentist can do, then I'm sure you can rewrite this too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But it is a toss-up. There's, even in the trans community, there's a lot of debate between like, well, if people aren't diagnosed with dysphoria, then that's going to make other people want to have access to the same. People do have access to this. If you wanted to go get a breast reduction right now, you got it. Absolutely. Nobody's going to question you doing that. But I want to get mine done because I don't need them and I don't want them, and that's not how I view myself. I have to have 2 letters. I have to go through therapy for 6 months. I have to have hormones for a year. Like,
it's crazy. See, I didn't even know that. You're educating me more.
It's
The hoops you gotta go through. For those of you out there, I'm not normally kind to ignorance. So if you're just homophobic, I hope you learned something today. Um, how can you be supportive of your family members, friends, or significant others? I got a few pointers. One, educate yourself, like I mentioned earlier, about transgender issues by reading books, attending conferences, consulting with transgender experts. You can be aware of your attitudes concerning people with gender non-conforming appearance or behavior. You can know that transgender people have membership in various socio-culture identity groups. There is not one universal way to look or be transgender. You can use the names and pronouns that are appropriate to each person's gender, presentation, and identity. If in doubt, ask. Don't make assumptions about transgender people' sexual orientation either, because as I stated earlier, everybody's different.
Mhm.
I just want for you to answer me. Well, I got one more question. What are the rude things to say to a trans person? Is it okay to ask a stranger if they are trans? This is one of the most common issues. I don't know if you have you heard of Stephen Chowder? He's a guy on YouTube that does these shows called Change My Mind. And one time he did a show, Change My Mind, on transgender people and saying they it was a really I'm gonna send you the link. It was a really good one. They were basically trying to argue the point of gender, and one woman got really upset and she said this is now called an attack of violence against me. You knowing my pronoun and still calling me something that I do not identify as. So how should people go about that?
So again, the notion that I want to believe that most people ask questions because they're curious.
The Ray Hop, he's not a Crowder fan. He said he's disgusting.
Knowing
I know it's a tough one.
It's I mean, rude questions to ask a trans person are, I mean, that's pretty easy. What was your name before? That's rude. Why is that? That's not my name anymore. You don't need to know that. I paid a lot of money for it to be this is my current name, and I paid a lot of good money for it. So if you don't call me that, then I'm going to call you something stupid, you know? Like, that's sort of the same mentality. Like if somebody has not the same, but in a similar context, if somebody worked really hard to get their doctorate degree and you didn't address them as doctor, and they corrected you to address them as doctor, like, and you don't do it, you were just choosing to be disrespectful. So if you do know someone's name and pronoun, and it is a deliberate thing, not like oh, they don't use those pronouns anymore, they use these pronouns, and correcting yourself, but like a deliberate, like, oh, he, she, me, like that
Yeah.
is, whatever hurt you had as a child, like, a lot of times, like, it's cis guys, they probably wore their mom's dress and then got the shit beat out of them. That's probably why they're rude to people who express differently than them now, because they weren't accepted, so they're not going to accept somebody else. You know what I mean? But asking somebody's, like, very, like, what's your Christian name? What was your birth name? What's your dead name? What was your name before? Like, irrelevant information, doesn't matter. Two, asking about, like, especially strangers, if you have a notion someone might be trans, the last thing that should be done is making it a public thing. Like, you're like,
to So don't ask them in like around a bunch of people. Be
Yeah,
private.
definitely not around a bunch of people, because even though you might be somewhere where like they are safe,
Mhm.
I have literally been standing next to somebody in the grocery store, like, making small talk, and then they say something racist, and I'm like, ugh, yikes. So if they found out I was trans, like, would they treat me differently? And that's not something I'm willing to take. If that's how you feel about Black people, then I don't want to know how you feel about trans people. And so,
Right. Mhm.
for also, not every person is as open and comfortable as I am, because there's been violence against them or around people in general, um, against trans people in general. Like, I have the trans symbol on my wrist, so if people know what it means, I'm not trying to hide it, because I see the importance of like being vulnerable and also and open about it, and also because I spend a lot of time living in the shadows. And again, I don't do that anymore. Don't ask what's in someone's pants. You don't want somebody, unless you are sleeping with me. You have
Sleeping or
no,
that close to you.
that's yeah. If you are, the only reason you would need to know what is in my pants is if there's an emergency, or if we're planning on sleeping together and need to have a conversation about consent and kinks and all that kind of stuff, then we need to know what touches are good and what touches are bad. But I do not owe anybody an explanation of like, well, why didn't you tell me, or anything like that. But yeah, if you're in a public setting and you think somebody might be trans, um, unless you are being like if a trans person comes with your friend to a party, and and you don't know that they're trans before you get to that party, like, if it's just some person walking around, you're like, oh, they might be trans, I'm gonna go ask them. Don't do that. Don't follow people
Yeah.
around. That's weird. That is
First of all, I don't even see the point of that. If you're not trying to talk to that person or trying to date them, mind your fucking business.
like, if your friend brings their trans friend along, unless that person tells you that they're trans, or unless you have an opportunity to have a really intimate one-on-one conversation with them, like maybe like they invite you to go get a drink and they offer that, what does it matter to you to know if somebody's trans or not? You know what I mean? Unless you're in a place where it's not safe. If you're in a place and you see somebody like panicking, like looking for a bathroom, and you think they might be trans, that's when it is important for you to like make yourself known as an ally. Like, hey, I'm so and so, these are my pronouns. Are you looking for the bathroom? I think they're over here. Like, there's ways, like, or you can go with me, or I'll wait outside, like I'll wait next to the door and make sure no one bothers you. Like, providing an opportunity for somebody who is a trans person who is scared to make them feel safe. That's what the difference between allyship and being nosy.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So yeah, those are
Well,
big ones.
this was amazing. I want to thank you so much for being here and enlightening us. I
Anytime.
would definitely like you to come back in the future if you're interested for other stuff.
Please. Yes, please.
Everybody who was here paying, listening, and everybody who was respectful. I appreciate you guys. You already know. Please do subscribe to BMF Goddess on YouTube. I will also add DJ's social media stuff so you can follow him as well. And just thank you. Good night, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
This will be on YouTube most likely on Monday. Have a good night, guys. May the force be with you.
Bye.